Kamalo'ula, which today we're signifying is the 15 acres behind Prince Kuhio Park, Kamalo'ula actually encompassed 1,000 acres that went from what's now Kukui'ula Harbor all the way to the eastern bypass just past Poipu Beach. Around the year 1000, when the first settlers to this area got here, the whole world was pahoehoe lava, which is flat lava rocks. I mean, the entire place, there was no soil here. So the way that they grew food was they would take green waste and they would pile it all up, and then they would cover it with rocks. And then as the green waste deteriorated, the rocks would start to collapse. And when it collapsed all the way down, they knew that it was all compost under there. And then when it rains, lava rocks absorb water. So in between the cracks, between the rocks is where you put your cuttings, and then it would grow that way, and then it was successful. But then as the population grew, they realized that they needed to bring water down here, and they needed some kind of soil to grow in. So they pushed rocks together and they built an aqueduct that went from Kahili Mountain, which from where we sit now is almost 3 miles away. And they built this aqueduct to bring water from there to here. So from there to here, what they did was they packed that aqueduct full of soil from up there, and as the water came down, the water brought the soil. So after 400 years, you had between 8 and 12 inches of soil on top of the rock, and so now you could grow things. And because that soil came from the mountains, it was very fertile, and it could grow so much food. That's what prompted King Kamehameha to want to conquer Kauai, because he knew that this area could feed his entire kingdom. The bay out in front of here is called Ho'ai, and Ho'ai means the bay of food, because this is where all the food was. Today we're trying to identify all the different archaeological sites that exist, and we know there's several hundred back in that area, so we need to identify them, do data recovery around them so we can actually prove what it is. Because one of the things that we've been searching for is, we have a fish pond here, and whenever you see a fish pond, somewhere nearby is a very strong female presence, because fish ponds are for nurturing, and the female presence is a nurturing presence. So there's got to be a women's dwelling area, women's eating house back here, which we've never been able to identify, but we know it has to be here. So we're working really hard to tread real lightly, and which is difficult to do when you're trying to clear these halekoa forests back there where the trees are like 8 inches apart, and some of the trunks are 4, 5, 6 inches in diameter. So it gets a little dicey sometimes, but we're doing the best we can, doing everything clearing by hand, which is difficult. But we're proud to do it, because as we start to uncover, we can see some of the craftsmanship on how the rocks were placed and everything. It makes you really proud of our ancestors that they were able to do these things here. Because, for example, in the aqueduct, which we call an awai, the inside, the rocks that form the walls are a pretty uniform 5 or 6 inches thick. The secondary purpose of that whole system was flood control. So when it's raining up really hard up in the mountains, and you start hearing what sounds like thunder up there, that's not thunder, those are the boulders hitting each other, because here comes the flash flood. And if all that water and rock comes down all at once, you're going to have all kinds of damage here, like you had in Honolulu a couple years ago in that flood. Well, that's because they didn't have this system. So they controlled their environment. They knew what they were doing. A lot of it gets lost because as you have the Western influences coming in and they use the land for different purposes, those elements become less relevant. And as they bulldoze some of the rock formations in order just to grow sugarcane or whatever, you want to make those things not as important, so it's not a big deal to bulldoze them out of the way. And then you have this period in time when they made it illegal to speak your language and all those things, so then you start you start having a population that believes their culture was bad. So you start viewing your culture as less than. So today when we bring all these kids and everything and people to help work back here, and they see the things that are there, they have a renewed interest and a new sense of pride in what our ancestors were able to do. And that's why, to me, it's important.